numbers going up. So welcome everybody. Feel free to drop where you're joining in from the chat as usual. Say hello. I'm joining from Berlin actually. Where are you joining from, Hila?
I'm from Zoom.
Nice. In the world. Great background, by the way. If you guys are noticed, we're back to the regular platform engineers meetups with this one post platform con. So we did all the pre-platform con stuff, the platform con, the post-platform con, and now we're back on fully platform engineers proper talks, which is what Hila is going to give today. As I said, feel free to drop a hi in the chat. I will share here in the meantime. I was fishing that out. Hila's talk at PlatformCon. So if anyone has missed it, you can go check it out. It's in the Platform Engineers YouTube channel. Yeah, and we can wait maybe 30 more seconds to let people roll in before we get started. As usual, the session is recorded. We'll send. You can, well, by the way, you can find it on the Platform Engineers YouTube. It's just a stream that is going live right now. But wait, let me see if there's any questions going on there. Not yet. But yeah, so feel free to use the chat for any questions you might have. Hila's going to go through 25, 30 minutes of slides and presentation. I'm going to talk about open source today. And feel free to use either the chat or the Q&A. Q&A is a little bit better because we can organize the questions then. And we'll try to get to your questions as we go through things, or we'll have a 10, 15 minutes question Q&A at the end.
Because of the setup, I can't really see this chat right now, so I will go over it right after the
I can also bring it up if there's something that maybe requires your immediate attention, but otherwise, yeah, we can get to it at the end. All right, but I think with that we can get started. Hila, thank you so much for doing this. Great background, and I'll hand it over to you.
Cool, and you can see my screen, right? My share.
Nope, we can't see your screen right now.
Because I did a share. Do you see it now?
Now we do.
Okay, and now is it bigger?
Now it's bigger.
Awesome.
All
okay.
Right.
So I can start. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. And this talk will be about open source, and open source is open choice, right? So in this talk, I will give you a set of tools to help ease your decision about open source adoption, when you should do it, and practical tools that you can use to choose the right open source project for you. So first of all, hi, I'm Hila Fish. I'm a senior DevOps engineer and I work for Wix. For those of you who don't know, Wix is a company that provides a platform for building websites, either for tech-savvy people or not. It's for everyone, and we're hiring, and that's that. I have 15 years of experience in the tech industry. I'm a DevOps culture fan. I think this is what helps companies achieve great things. I live in Israel, and I'm a conferences co-organizer, DevOps Days Tel Aviv in Israel, and StatsCraft, which is a monitoring convention. I'm mentoring courses and communities. We have great communities in Israel for technical women in tech, and Pull Request, which is a open source community. So I lead programs there as well. And on my spare time, I'm a lead singer in a cover band, as you can see this picture, which is a lot of fun. Okay, so open source software is publicly available and can be modified at will, right? Of course, you need to open a PR, not merge to main immediately, right? But it is publicly available and can be modified, and it is awesome. And the fact is that a lot of tools that we have on our day-to-day that we use is open source, like Python, React, Java, Firefox, Linux, right? So a lot of things that we use on our day-to-day is open source, and it is awesome to know. In the late 90s, proprietary software was considered the standard, and the notion of making source code public was considered best strategy for tech companies. And coming forward to 2020 and up until now, the concept of open source really became mainstream. So what's so good about open source, right? Because I'm an open source advocate. I want to share with you the whole things and why it's so good and why I think it's very good. So Open source really helps build a rich developer community because it is a society that is based on knowledge, but it really relies on the core values of communication and collaboration to succeed. And Manish Sharma, who's the general manager of GitHub India, he said that open source is an enabler of innovation, and companies that turn to open source, it really helps them speed up business transformation. So, and open source also really boosts code quality and security because, as Linus Torvald said, the creator of Linux, he said that given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, meaning since the code is publicly available, everyone can spot and correct errors and omissions, and it is very good to have. Right, okay. And in regards to open source and the adoption for companies, my company as well adopts and really contributes to open source. Wix released like 228 projects to open source, and there's a link. We will share the presentation later on. The link below is for an initiative that is part of my activity in the open source community in Israel. We have an initiative called Open Source Rel, like DevRel, but for open source, that we showcase companies and how they contribute to open source and perceive it. And it really is good, not only for them, right, to showcase what they do, but also for us, the people that live in Israel or one that can work remotely. If we want to work for a company that really embraces open source because we share the same values, then we can see what they are doing in this realm, and this is very good to have this information. So if you want to read about Wix contribution to open source or other companies that participated in the initiative until now, or you want to have your company initiative get featured in this initiative because it's not only for Israeli companies, then talk to me after this presentation. Okay, getting back to the route. So open source boosts adaptivity because, as we know, the more users we have, the more use cases that we have, and then the code will be more robust. And the thing here is that adaptivity to various use cases really allows us to surface bugs and edge cases much more rapidly than traditional QA processes. It really encourages more modularity and avoiding the one-size-fits-all assumption, resulting in great flexibility and lower customization costs in the long run. Agility, right? So most of, or a lot of open source projects really follows modern software development processes, which leads to rapid development cycles, which leads to more frequent releases without sacrificing quality. And we also have less bureaucracy because, as you know, opening a PR versus opening a commercial support ticket, there is a lot of differences to it. So there's that. And for open source, we don't have regularly scheduled release processes. The maintainers just release the project's releases, and that's that, and anyone can use it whenever they want. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the DevOps perspective towards open source, because as we know, open source is usually something that is more dealt from the developer's angle. So I want to share with you guys the DevOps perspective to it. So in order to understand DevOps perspective, let's understand the developers first. So developers say, hey, I have functionality factors to consider, AKA, will the library that I just found get integrated in my code properly, and what efforts are needed to do so? As opposed to that, DevOps, we care about the environment, and the environment is our focus. So when I see a project, I ask myself, is the project will get integrated in the environment properly, and the efforts that I need to do so, and I have other considerations like security and maintenance and a lot of things to consider in regards to the environment stability when I introduce something new. Another thing is that collaboration is a common ground between DevOps and open source, right? And as we know, when it comes to challenges, collaboration leads to better conclusions and solutions. And when communities form around shared challenges, the diversity of ideas that naturally emerges surfaces better solutions. And we all want better solutions because we care about the environment and we want to have the best solutions possible for the environment to make it stable and safe and secure. We also treat open source as tools, and we ask ourselves, do we want to introduce something to the system, something that will help me deliver code or automate this or introduce this capability, right? So since a lot of DevOps engineers came from the background of system engineers, then the concept of integration is not strange for us. So we really are able to just integrate things as we see fit. As you know, not everything is good and right? There are a lot of complexity and things to consider. And since the environment is our focus, the environment stability is what we care most. And we are in a constant state of trade-offs and maintaining balance between everything. So if I see a project or I integrated a project, I need to see if the releases that gets released are good enough to introduce to the environment, because I don't want to rock the boat too much if it's not really worthwhile, right? So there's that. And also complexity. Show me one person that is able to upgrade Jenkins without any fear of the plugins getting break, right? So there is a lot of complexity, a lot of layers out there to really think of when we do something or introduce something to our environment. And we need to really make sure that rocking the boat is worthwhile to have these features or these bug fixes. And because there is a lot of projects out there, right? A lot of thousands of projects out there. We need to do a research, right? A normal research to make sure that we know what we introduce to our environment. So read blogs and see some reviews on YouTube and stuff like that. So we really need to make sure that we know exactly what we introduce to the environment. Another thing is, this is generally true for DevOps in general, but also for open source as well. We need to keep tabs and be informed of what's going on. So I will give you an example. So if I found the project, the version 1.0, there are the features is not that great, aka not really suitable for my use case, or there's a bug that I can't really afford myself to introduce to the environment. So if I keep tabs and be informed of what's going on with this project, then maybe I will see that version 2.0 is good enough to use. It will fit exactly my use case, and the bug was fixed, and everything is good and well. So there's that. And another thing is that, let's take, for example, CentOS. CentOS reached the end of life at the end of 2021. End of life means no more security patches will get released. If I didn't know about that, then I'm putting my systems at risk, right? Because there wouldn't be more security patches, aka the environment wouldn't be secured and safe and stable, and this is not good. And the thing here is that I really like this picture. It says keep moving people, even though, as you can see, no one is there. That's the thing. We need to motivate ourselves and be informed of what's going on, even though no one will tell us to do so. You don't need to wait for your team leader to ask you and, hey, check this or check that. You need to motivate yourself. I think this is what helps you be a better engineer. And it really is linked also to open source adoption in this scenario. Okay, so we talked about the great things of open source, right? But it's not always something that you should implement right up at the top of your head, right? So when should we consider using and adopting open source in our environment? When we have an uncommon use case. I will give you an example. On one of my previous companies, we had pods in Kubernetes, and we wanted them to downscale the pods to 0. Why? Because we didn't have much more, the application didn't need to run for a long time. And we want to save money, because if it doesn't need to run 24/7, then why do it, right? So at the time we used GKE, the Kubernetes on Google Cloud. It allowed to downscale only to 1 and not to 0. And that's why we searched online and found Keda. Keda is an awesome open source tool that helps you downscale to 0 based on several conditions that you can set. It's well maintained. I will speak about it later on. So this is an example of an uncommon use case, and you can find a solution for that online. And if you find it and it fits your use case, then why not use it? Limited budget. So when your budget is limited and you can't really afford yourself to purchase an enterprise license of the software, then you can use a free version or an open source alternative. And it will also allow lower total cost of ownership, because adopting open source software generally has a lower cost because the software itself comes at no cost or a relatively low cost, and shifts the cost center from licensing to customization and implementation, right? Because training and maintenance and support will be equally invested in an open source project adoption versus proprietary software. So might as well boost open source adoption if there is no significant reason that is preventing you from doing so, right? So that's that. Another reason to adopt open source is when you have insufficient in-house resources, ability-wise, like this family guy right here, or capacity-wise, to either create a solution from scratch or enhancing solutions. So, and there's also the thing of why reinvent the wheel, right? So if there's an open source tool that you found that really fits your use case, then why do it yourself? You can just use it. You have the cleverness of the crowd. I don't know how to say it in English, but a lot of people are using it, so you know that it's good. We will cover it later on, so you can just might as well and adopt this project, open source project. Okay, so like anything in life, not everything is good, right? There are disadvantages for adopting open source. Of course, not everything is will be. But these are a few that you should really consider. First of all, security by obscurity. This concept is not applied for open source, right? Because proprietary software can say our code is our source code is closed, then people can't really find security loopholes and stuff like that. So that's why this concept is not applied on open source. Another thing is that it could be prone to abuse, right? So it doesn't happen a lot, but I can give you two examples that happened somewhat recently. First one is the colors NPM package, in which the maintainer introduced a loop to the code and created a lot of issues for a lot of companies. And Faker.js, where the maintainer had a bankruptcy, and the release of the version that he had was actually to delete the project. He deleted the project entirely. So it could happen, okay? I'm not saying it happens a lot, but since it could happen, and yeah, you can say, I can just lock the versions in requirements.txt or packages JSON lock. You could, but if everyone would do it, then we probably wouldn't hear about these cases, right? So it could happen. It is prone to abuse because people that maintain it are people like me and you. So it's something that you need to take into consideration. Compliance. So in its raw form, open source usually gives no warranty or official guarantee, making it difficult to use in a business environment where compliance is a must. So it's something that also needs to be considered in this scenario. Open source is not always entirely free, right? And especially if your reason to select open source is a limited budget, then you really should thoroughly examine the license of the project that you found before you decide to adopt it. Discontinued projects. So as you know, open source projects are maintained by people like me and you, and they can decide at any point they stop maintaining this project, and it's okay, they are allowed to do it, right? So if you are using a project that was discontinued, it means that you either need to maintain it yourself or do a migration to another tool which is maintained. So it's also something that needs to be considered. Support is not guaranteed. So again, people like me and you, right, they don't owe you anything, and you should really assume good faith when you're opening a PR and asking for a feature or a bug fix. But I can tell you that the open source tool that I mentioned, Keda, was awesome. We were about to introduce it to production. I had some issues that only introduced with load. Then I opened an issue. I really asked nicely, explained the situation. It was like, I think Thursday late evening or Friday, and they released a version for me, and they were super attentive and super communicative. So it really is awesome. It doesn't surprise me because, again, the common ground between open source and DevOps is collaboration and communication, but still it's so heartwarming. It's very good and good to know that people are good and they want to help, right? So support is not guaranteed, but you can assume good faith. And just a small note about that in the regards of the proprietary software. In proprietary software, the support is guaranteed, but it's not guaranteed to be in high quality. And we can talk about it later when I'm not recorded. So that's that. And finally, SaaS alternatives. So it's not really the opposite of an open source, but on some occasions, companies will prefer the SaaS managed solution because it saves them time, right? Time to manage the software, to integrate it. Dev enablement shifts from DevOps dependency to a cloud lock scenario that in the overall trade-off is worthwhile. And SaaS popularity is likely only to rise as organizations shift more and more resources to the cloud. Okay, so to conclude, there is no really right or wrong when it comes to adopting open source projects. It's a matter of perspective, and there are multiple factors to consider. You should choose what's best for your needs. And speaking of your needs, how do you choose an open source project? So let's say you say, okay, cool, I want to adopt open source. Great, you have a use case, you Googled it, you found 2, 3, 4 options to use. How do you know which one of them to use? How do you know which one is good enough in its own, independently, and good enough for your use case? So let's see. We have several questions that we can ask ourselves and see what we get, right? So the questions are popularity, if the project is popular, active, ready to use, documented well, does the project have ecosystem, is it easy to use, and roadmap. So let's cover each one. Popularity, so you can check GitHub stars and see how many it has. It's usually it is a good indication whether is the project popular or not. You can also check if the project is part of CNCF or incubator, because if so, it is a great stamp that it is popular and ready to use. You can Google the project alone to check for online presence, but you should also Google the project versus similar products, either the project that you found or other proprietary software, and check for reviews. And if you see reviews, you can see if what you read is really relates to your use case and see which project is better fitted for your use case based on the reviews that you found. Activity, so check the commits rate. Are the commits rate daily, weekly, monthly? How many issues are there? How many releases are there? Is the project maintained by one developer or more? Does the project have sponsors? Sponsors means companies usually that gives money to the maintainers to keep maintaining the project, right? It means that the company sees future in this project. They see a vision, they believe in this product, right? So all of these questions are meant to answer a simple question that if you adopt a project or you're about to adopt this project, how much time you should wait until you get a bug fix released or a feature released. That's it, and it really is important, especially if you adopt a project that will serve you in a heavy use case, that will serve you in a lot of things at work. Readiness, so is the project declared as production ready? Third time's the charm. I mentioned CADA, I will mention it again. CADA is declared as production ready. For me, as DevOps engineer, that is basically the production gatekeeper. It really is good to know that it is production ready, so there's that. You could also check if the current features are enough to sustain usage. And is my use case covered fully in the current state? And if not, am I okay with it? Because if I'm not okay with it, maybe I should keep tabs and wait for the next version. Maybe the next version will be more suited for my use case. Documentation. So you found a project, right? You don't know anything about this project. The only way to know anything about the project is documentation. And basically, documentation is the gateway, right, for the project. So if the documentation is rich and covers most aspects, like how to integrate and known issues and explanations about the features, then probably you will be able to integrate it better and maintain it in the long run. So documentation is a very important aspect here because it will help both on the implementation phase and also on your day-to-day. Ecosystem. So I think ecosystem is the most important key metric here, and I will explain why. On one of my previous companies, I used Rundeck as a CI tool, and another company, I used Jenkins. And when I had to do some stuff, introduce some more capabilities or fix some stuff, it was very hard back then, because back then the documentation wasn't great and ecosystem was very, very little. So I didn't have many people to reach out to and ask for help. And it was very hard to maintain this CI tool in a day-to-day basis. As opposed to that, Jenkins, you can say a lot of things about Jenkins, right? But it has a very wide ecosystem, dedicated Slack channel, a lot of questions and answers on Stack Overflow. So using Jenkins is much more feasible on the day-to-day. And that's why I'm saying that ecosystem is I think the most important metric, because this is the metric that will affect your day-to-day. Anything about the implementation is good, it's important, but your day-to-day is what you will feel in a daily basis. So this is very, very important. Easy to use. So do a POC and see how well the project gets integrated in your environment, and also see the ratio between the amount of time to implement until the integration is actually done. And also check the issues on GitHub. Are the issues about features or about how do I do X? Because if the issues are about how do I do X, probably the project is not that easy to use, and you should consider that before you decide to adopt it. And lastly, roadmap. Is the project defined as an open source, or is it planned to go towards monetization, like what happened with InfluxDB? It changed from open source to closed source, and we all know what that means. And also features planning. Check if there is a feature planning, and then it will help you understand if the project is well maintained, and also for you to see if you should wait, you should implement it right now, or wait for the feature that will fit perfectly for your use case. Okay, so I covered a lot of questions here, right? So let's sum things up. How do we choose an open source project? You should ask the general questions to cover the basics, to understand if the project is in a ready enough state to implement and integrate. But you should also ask the tailored specific questions to cover your use case and your pain points. So for example, if you have a heavy use case, then you should focus on and really put the weight on the metrics of documentation and ecosystem. But for example, if you have no capacity for maintenance, then you should put the emphasis and put the weights on the readiness and ease of use metrics. Do a POC, see how well the project gets integrated in your environment, and rely on your research, right? Ecosystem to the rescue, engage in GitHub and raise issues and contribute for the project success and eventually your success. And last but not least, since I'm an open source advocate, I want to show you and share with you guys how to contribute to open source without writing a single line of code, either because you don't know how to or because you don't have time to do it. So open issues, bug fixes or feature requests, it will help the project get bigger and more robust, and will help anyone that will use this project later on. Modify documentation. So documentation is a skill. Writing documentation is a skill, and if you have the skill, please leverage it to have a better documentation, because as you've seen, documentation is a metric to choose a project to integrate or not. So if you have the skill, please leverage it. Everyone will thank you. Share your use case. So I've written a blog post. I've put a link here called the Script Server. It's an open source tool that allows to make accessible Terraform code and Ansible playbooks and other various scripts. You can make it accessible via a UI, and then you have also a mechanism of permissions. So it was good because I had a use case where I had non-techie people from my company that needed to do some stuff, and I didn't want to give them permissions to go to servers and do maybe some trouble there. Again, environment is the focus. So I used this tool. It was very good to use, and writing a blog post about it, it's good because that way people can get exposed to this project and maybe use it and adopt it as well, and maybe inspire others to share their use cases and help spread the word about open source. Sponsorship. So as we know, money makes the world go around, right? So a lot of the times a project gets continued just because of sponsorship, because people need the money to maintain. They can't really afford doing it on their spare time. So they need the money to do it. So if you can sponsor it, pitch in, or you can convince your company to invest, like, for example, what I showed you at the beginning, that the article that I wrote about Wix contribution to open source, one of the things they do is sponsorship. We sponsor open source projects that we use on our day-to-day at our work. So if you can help with sponsorship, it will be awesome. It will really help boost open source world. Another thing is to hold an open source mindset. So if I have a certain use case, yeah, I can just go and Google or go to a proprietary software, or I can Google for an open source alternatives, right? So if I have this mindset to go to open source as well, again, if it fits my use case and there isn't really a significant reason that prevents me from doing that, but if I have this mindset, I can also inspire others on this mindset, and they will maybe do it as well, and then more open source will get introduced to companies, and this is awesome. And last but not least, spread the word on open source on conferences or meetups or webinars like I'm doing just now, and then it will boost the presence of it everywhere. So thank you so much. I'm here for questions. So if you have any questions, let's see. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Hila. That was great. And I see a lot of people stayed throughout the whole presentation. It's usually a really good sign. So don't be shy. Drop in your questions in the Q&A or in the chat. We already have one by Baras, quite general, but how to get started with open source. I think you obviously talked about that, but do you want to give like a quick couple of point summary on that?
Yeah, so it is a general question, so I don't know if how to get with open source in regards to contribution or in regards to adoption. So if it's contribution, the simple way is to contribute documentation, because it will have a great impact, and you don't need to really navigate between the entire parts of the code in order to contribute. So contribution of documentation is always the easy thing to do in regards to contribution to open source projects, but there are other things that you can do in order to contribute code. Actually, there's a good talk about it in one of the meetups of the open source community I'm in. I can share the link, but it has like a whole Torah for that. But it is, there are ways. You can select projects that are friendlier for the user. Sometimes they put in the documentation, they say, this is a good project to start from. So they are really trying to push people to contribute. So that's why they put this description. So this is in regards to contribution. In regards to adoption, I think this is everything that I just talked about in the last 30 minutes. But if you have any other specific questions, you can just ask, and I'll be more than happy to answer.
So Amir is asking, can you recommend any open source software you've used in your DevOps ecosystem in particular?
So Keda is very well. I very recommend it for Kubernetes autoscaling. Terraform is open source. It has, of course, enterprise edition, but it is open source. It is very well maintained as open source, and Terraform is a very good tool for creating infrastructure. Ansible for configuration management. Jenkins, I used it quite a lot for CI/CD, so I really recommend it. You don't have to be a developer to use Jenkins, because Jenkins has a declarative and scripted way. So usually developers will choose the scripted way, and then DevOps that doesn't have a really rich background in development will choose the declarative way. Other things, so the scripter was good to make things accessible for people. I also recommend it. It was pretty straightforward to implement as well. And ecosystem is monitoring, of course, monitoring. How do I forget monitoring? So Prometheus, I assume everyone knows it, but it is very widely used because it's very flexible. Some say that we have a new player in the field, Victoria Metrics. It is somewhat based on Prometheus, but it really extended. So if you have more scalable issues, or you need to be more flexible with the queries that you run, then Victoria Metrics is the one that you should go to. And I don't have anything else in mind at the moment.
So, yeah, we'll wait for more questions. I have one. So if you were to sort of like roll out your own open source project, how would you go about sort of, getting initial traction, initial users, making sure that you have contributors, and I guess, like, what is important for a nascent open source project? Like, does it need a committee? Does it need regular meeting schedules? Like, what are the sort of like fundamentals in that sense?
You mean for integrating it at work?
No, if you let's say when you at Weeks, for instance, you're rolling out, you're open sourcing something, right? Like a specific piece of software or something. How would you go about trying to garner more usage for it, right? So getting more eyeballs on it, the people see it, know that it's there, know that they can use it, understand the use cases, right? So how do you educate people to it?
You mean the project that we as Wix released to open source?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we should always leverage the things that we have, right in front of us, right? So online presence and online media is a very crucial player in that. We can write blog posts that help people understand the value of it. And we don't have really, it's not like a proprietary software. When you say something about proprietary software, you know that your angle is money, right? In open source, when I read about open source, I know that the intention of the writer is to help me, because it doesn't make anything out of it. So just we write blog posts as simple as, this is the use cases that this project is currently supports. It is open source, so if you want think about different use cases, you can contribute to it. So just the angle of what's in it for me is the one that should talk us out into anything. So blog posts about why to use it, a post in LinkedIn, share the knowledge and share the projects in conferences and meetups as well, because at least in Israel, we have a lot of conferences and meetups that we just share about open source tools. And it's good because a lot of the times open source projects doesn't get enough marketing because it's not really sponsored, but it is a very good tool to use. So there are a lot of platforms that allows us to spread the word, like meetups, and meetups get recorded and we post about it online on the groups. So we do whatever we can to spread the word, but usually we utilize the tools that are in front of us, like blog posts, post in LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever, and showcasing in meetups and conferences. And
how do you think about CNCF in that sense? How important is being part of the CNCF ecosystem?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't take part in releasing a project to an open source yet. It's one of my goals. So I don't know if it's something that is always gets in, in the priority. I assume so, and I assume that there are several guidelines or several steps in the way that you need to before you can be part of it. But it is, like I showed in my presentation, if the project is part of CNCF, it's a good stamp that the project is popular and good to use. So it's something to consider, especially if you really believe in this project.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that was it from my end. Any other questions from the audience? Otherwise, I see we're coming up on the 45 minutes. So if no more questions, I think we can wrap it up here. Hila, where can people find you if they want more?
I'm gonna share my screen again. Here are you have like mail, LinkedIn, Twitter. I'm available at all platforms, and really reach out either about open source or DevOps or SRE. I love to help people. So if you have anything you want to talk about, I also give talks about Terraform. So anything that you want to speak about in the realm of DevOps, SRE, or open source, then go right ahead. I'll be more than happy to help.
Awesome. And of course, you're also in the platform engineering Slack. So, if people have any follow-ups, you can also ask there and start a conversation there. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Hila, thank you so much for your time. This was super interesting, and I think people really enjoyed it. And I hope I'll see you around.
See you around, and thank you so much
right.
for this platform engineering platform. It is awesome.
No worries. Thank you. And thank you, everybody. We have a last-minute question. Should we take it?
I will read it pretty fast. I
Yeah.
believe enterprises will never be comfortable adopting the DevSecOps CI/CD based on open source due to no or little support. How does the open source community address that? I think that that's the thing. Ecosystem is important, and if we will really help our companies understand that this project is good and show them the value of this open source project, it doesn't matter if they don't see value at first. If we will show them the value, then you can't argue with value, right? You know the use case in your company. You know if the project suits this use case or not. You will show that, and then they can see whether you can start a POC at least and see how you take it from there. But stuff gets evolved, right? Terraform also started like little and then see how it gets integrated now. Everyone uses Terraform. So it's something that might take some time, but I believe that this is the way to go because a lot of things are open source and will keep on being open source. And a lot of companies started out as open source projects as well. So there's a reason to it. So I think it's a matter of time. It's a matter of perspective, and we will get there. It's just a matter of time, in my opinion.
Awesome. And with that, I think it's a wrap. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good evening, day, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Bye.